One of the most important things that you will ever learn about girls is that they are emotional creatures. If you were to say this to a girl, she would probably get really mad and call you a pig. But guys, honestly, we love girls, and that's why we want to learn more about them. In many cases, being overly emotional can be a bad thing, especially if you're a guy. But when it comes to girls, it is easy to make their emotions work in your favor rather than against you. What you're about to learn is so simple, yet so powerful. But first, let me tell you something that you already intuitively know. One of the biggest differences between males and females is that females will always have more options than men. This is simply the way that it is. If you were to take a semi-attractive female and have her ask 100 single guys for their phone numbers, she would most likely come back to you with 100 different phone numbers. If you were to send a semi-attractive male out to ask 100 girls for their phone numbers, he would probably come back with only 5 or 10 numbers. Due to the way that we function as males and females, girls will always have more options when it comes to mating than even the best looking men. So it makes perfect sense why girls are more selective when it comes to choosing a mate. As a decent looking guy, if you could choose any girl from a group of 10 girls, you would probably choose the most attractive girl of the group. Girls are no different, and they will choose the best they can realistically get from their options. So competition for girls is naturally going to be higher than for men, which means you're still indirectly competing with other men at all times. But what if I told you that there's a way that you can bypass this competition and immediately stand out from every other guy out there? This trick is called the X Factor, and you probably already have it right now without even knowing it. I mentioned earlier that girls are naturally emotional creatures by default. The way it normally works is that guys act and girls react. The X Factor is based on the reality that girls are primarily driven by emotions. And the best way to think about this is to imagine that all girls are like a giant lake of water. This giant lake is basically a girl's emotions, and most guys have virtually no impact on the lake. Using the X Factor is like casting a rock out into the lake and sending huge ripples across it. In other words, the X Factor is causing a huge emotional impact on a girl that you're interested in. So the only question left is how to actually do this. Throwing a massive rock into a girl's lake of emotions is actually really easy to do, but it does take some practice. I've mentioned in previous videos that your frame is easily the most important part of what you would call game, and your frame is basically your state of mind. The typical guy who doesn't do good with girls goes into a situation with a frame that is based on fear, and girls won't even bother attempting to shatter this frame because it's already broken. Now, on the other hand, the typical dominant masculine man goes into the situation with a strong frame, and shortly after a girl takes notice of this frame, she will try to break it. And this is your typical confidence testing that females do to men. If we were to break down the frame of a typical girl, we would see that it is one of being higher value than men. And you can't really blame girls for this because most men constantly, although unintentionally, reinforce this frame. In other words, girls know that by default, they have way more options than men, and this frame is constantly reinforced by society. To cast a rock into the lake, all that you have to do is break her frame. And the easiest way to do this is to tease her. Some guys prefer to say something that is mildly insulting and then immediately follow that up with a compliment. The truth is that girls are so used to guys giving them compliments and trying to please them that they completely lose their frame when a guy comes in and does the exact opposite of this. The X Factor is basically creating an emotional impact on a girl. And here's the crazy part. It doesn't really matter whether it's positive or negative. Something that girls will never tell you is that any emotional impact, whether it's negative or positive, is always better than no impact or no emotions. All you're really doing here is breaking down the girl's frame and stirring up her emotions. Some guys do this by teasing her about something that she's wearing, and others do it by acting like the girl is trying to flirt with them when she's obviously not. Unfortunately, many guys try to use the so-called X Factor and fail. And to avoid this, all that you have to do is go into every situation making sure that you have the right frame. When you present a girl with a dominant frame, she will instinctively test you to try to break your frame, which involves doing precisely what you're doing to her, which is trying to stir up your emotions and make you react in an emotional way. Most guys fail these tests miserably because they get defensive when a girl attempts to break their frame. And once a girl is able to do this, it can be extremely difficult to regain your frame and take advantage of the so-called X Factor. At its core, The X factor consists of approaching a girl with a dominant frame and breaking down her frame of thinking that she's higher value than you by teasing her or mildly insulting her. But for this to work correctly, you have to maintain your own frame of being the dominant, high-value male, or you simply won't have an impact on her emotions. Creating this emotional impact is one of the most effective ways to make almost any girl attracted to you, because girls are turned on by guys who can give them any emotional reaction, whether negative or positive. The ideal, most powerful way to do this is to make her experience a good balance of positive and negative emotions. Just like everything else in life, you need the bad to appreciate the good. And you need the darkness to appreciate the light, the hate to appreciate the love. And with that said, as always, you guys are amazing. And until next time, thank you so much for watching.